Hello and welcome to another unit review for Star Wars Legion. Today we are going to be going into the second part of the Kashyyyk Wave release, starting off with our glorious new droid overlords, more commonly known as the Super Tactical Droids. But this is going to be a new commander expansion for the Separatist Alliance, one that is going to bring 3 new unit cards and a whole bunch of versatile ways to field this model. And I have to say, in this wave, the Separatists are finally getting the love they deserve, and it's a very exciting time to be the proud owner of a droid army. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Super Tactical Droids unit cards and see what these characters are all about. Now, first up here, we're going to see that there is a pretty interesting way in which these are divided up. There's 3 variations of the Super Tactical Droid, 2 of which are named characters from the television shows, being Kraken and Kalani, and then a 3rd unit card for the standard Super Tactical Droid. Now, unfortunately, each of these unit cards are counted as a character, which means you cannot run multiple, even if they do have different names in the subtext, which I do find to be a little bit unfortunate. But let's go ahead and set aside my disappointment of only being able to field one of these guys and take a look at the unit cards themselves, starting with the standard Super Tactical Droid. Now, all of these units are going to be a single model commander units, sporting 5 health, courage 2, and a red defense die, followed up by a movement speed of 2, and will of course be droid troopers. After that, they are going to deviate slightly in terms of weapons and upgrades, but most significantly so in the keywords they have, which will inform their playstyle. But our standard Super Tactical Droid is going to come in at 95 points, and they will be sporting 2 command upgrade slots, followed up by a comms and a gear upgrade. The Super Tactical Droid will also have Surge to hit and 2 black dice in melee, followed up by a range 1 to 3 blaster sporting a red and white dice and the lethal 1 keyword, which will give it pierce when you spend an aim token. So this Super Tactical Droid is clearly going to be a support-oriented commander, and as we all know, the Separatist Alliance makes great use of those command upgrades thanks to Coordinate, so having the ability to slap on aggressive tactics and then also something like Esteemed Leader or Vigilance is the first big green checkmark that we're going to see for this unit. But we are going to have a slew of new keywords here also, which only makes these guys more appealing. And first up, we are going to have Strategize 1. And this ability will allow you to give one friendly unit at range 1 an aim and a dodge token, while the unit issuing this action gains a suppression token. So it's a bit similar to Calculate Odds, but with the suppression token going onto the issuer rather than the recipient. And while this is restricted to range 1, it does allow you to issue it to any unit and does not require line of sight. And while you could make the argument that a keyword like Spotter would be better here, as you could stack it with Electro Binos, which would dish out more aim tokens in a single action, it still is a good support keyword for any units on the front line, as it basically gives them a free quick thinking action. But next up here, we are going to have the Direct keyword, one that we saw on the T-Series Tactical Droid. However, this time, instead of it being Direct Core Trooper unit, you are allowed to direct any units that has the AI keyword, which means during the activation phase, you are going to be able to issue a free order off this unit onto a friendly unit within range 1 to 2, so long as they have the AI keyword, which is a much more useful version of Direct when you consider that this can target things like AATs and Droidicas. Still, you can always just use this ability to kick off that daisy chain of B1 coordinations, and just because you can issue orders to more expensive units does not mean you have to. However, if you are bringing this commander only because you want someone to kick off those coordinations, and you don't really have any other real plans with this unit's keywords or extra command slot, you may be better off just taking a simple T-Series, though your mileage may vary. But next up, we are going to have another new keyword that is going to be Override 1. And right off the bat here, I'm going to make note that the 1 in this keyword does not affect the amount of units you can use this ability on, as you would see with most other keywords, but rather the range in which it can be conducted. So Override can be used as many times as you want throughout the course of a turn, so long as it's being used within range 1. And this keyword is going to read, when a friendly unit at range 1 activates, the Super Tactical Droid himself may take on a suppression token for that unit to ignore their AI keyword. So, should you have a unit that you don't want to be at the behest of their AI protocols, the Super Tactical Droid may take on a suppression token for them to ignore it, again, so long as they are within the designated range. And with the ability to give out face-up orders and also aim and dodge tokens, having a keyword like Override may seem a little bit redundant on this unit profile. And while it may seem like a sort of tertiary failsafe in most lists, I'm sure competitive players are going to find great ways to make use of this keyword, most notably with units like BX sniper teams who are very much held back by their AI, though I'm not really sure how useful this keyword is going to be outside of those niche roles. But lastly, we are going to have the Sharpshooter 1 keyword, which is going to help buff this unit's offensive capabilities. And while I still wouldn't consider him anywhere close to being a combat-oriented unit, being able to plink away at wounds with Sharpshooter and Pierce in those late turns can be quite useful, and combined with an offensive surge, it is definitely a nice perk. So overall, what is my first impressions on the Super Tactical Droid in its standard, non-named iteration? Well, it's a pretty good unit, though I don't think you're packing quite as much points worth into a single model as you would with the T-Series. Once again, I could see him getting a lot of mileage out of camping next to BX sniper bubbles, though if you are taking this unit just for direct and strategize, you might be able to save some points and just take a simple T-Series, as they are about half the cost and can still be quite the workhorse when it comes to those support keywords. However, the Super Tactical Droid does have his own deck of command cards, so if you don't have another character in the list, I would definitely recommend upgrading your T-Series to a Super Tactical Droid, because without giving too much away, these new command cards are pretty awesome. But that will move us along to our next unit card, which is going to be Kraken. And for 5 more points, you are going to be gaining a training upgrade slot, and upgrading your Surge to Hit to a Surge to Crit, and a new slew of weapon profiles. First up being the Overwhelm melee attack that has lethal 1 and 4 red dice, making this droid pretty formidable in close combat, along with a range 1 to 3 blaster that is going to have 2 black dice and Pierce 1. So both of Kraken's upgrades are going to be a flat out upgrade over the standard Super Tactical Droid's weapons. Combine that with Surge to Crit and an additional training upgrade slot, and you are going to have a pretty formidable unit profile that can definitely partake in combat. Kraken, however, does still have some support keywords, which will make him a sort of frontline commander who's not afraid to get his hands dirty. And first up here, we are going to have Strategize 1, much like on the standard Super Tactical Droid. And I think Kraken is going to be a little bit more selfish with this keyword than the Super Tactical Droid would be, as he will probably be using it on himself as a sort of pseudo quick thinking. Because, let's be honest, with keywords like lethal and only 5 wounds, he is going to prioritize tokens, both dodge and aim, on himself, more so than any units that might be around him. But next up, we are going to see that Kraken drops the direct keyword in lieu of charge, which will definitely solidify him as a combat-oriented commander, more so than support. And I have to say, this is one of the bigger drawbacks on Kraken, though it is very nice of him to have charge. He sacrifices one of the best Super Tactical Droid's keywords in order to gain it, and because of that, I'm not sure how competitive Kraken is going to be in the long run. A lot of people seem to be really latching onto him, and he does seem very fun to play thanks to his offensive profile, but missing out on direct is definitely a big deal. But next up, we are going to see that Kraken has Override 2. Again, a keyword that is going to allow him to take on suppression tokens for nearby units to ignore their AI. And as I mentioned earlier, the number in this does not increase the amount of times you can do this. You're allowed to do it infinite times during a turn, but instead it determines the range in which it can be performed, meaning Kraken can override a friendly unit's AI at range 1 to 2, effectively doubling its bubble. And while this is a major boost over Override 1, droid players don't really seem to be struggling with AI that much, but it is definitely another tool in the arsenal, and perhaps people will start dropping things like T-Series in their B2 squads and going with Override instead. And it is going to be very interesting seeing and how the meta behind building a separatist list is going to develop in the future. But after that, Kraken is going to have Sharpshooter 2, which is going to be an upgrade over the standard Sharpshooter 1 we saw, and further dedicate him as a combat-oriented commander. Though with only 2 black dice on his ranged attack, he is still very much going to be a plinking unit, and would much prefer getting into melee and making use of that Overwhelm attack. So what do I think about Kraken's unit card? Well, it's very interesting, and it does look like a lot of fun to play. Though with just 5 wounds and no innate immunity to pierce, I do have my doubts about him as a close-range brawling commander. Obviously, he is going to pair very well with Magna Guards, who can protect him and also do damage in close combat. But for the time being, I'm just not too sure how useful that override keyword is going to be. Obviously, it's going to work very well for those BX Commando droid snipers, and perhaps Kraken could camp with a bubble of them and serve as a linebacker against any units who would try and run up on them. But if he's just going to be there for emotional support and doesn't get to attack throughout the course of a match, I don't really think that's going to be the best use of 100 plus points. And personally, I would take the standard super tactical droid in that role and keep Kraken as a backup melee hero, perhaps for Grievous or Maul, who may be best used as another frontline threat for your opponent to assess. But that is going to move us along to our third unit card, and that is going to be Kalani. And if Kraken is our super tactical droid that specializes in combat, then Kalani is the one that specializes in support. And for 100 points, you are going to be getting something akin to that standard super tactical droid unit profile, but this time you are going to be getting an extra command upgrade slot, which means this character is going to have a whopping 3 command upgrade slots, something that has not been seen in Star Wars Legion before now. And I do find it kind of funny that a 100-point battle droid is the character that gets it. Meanwhile, they refuse to give characters like Yoda Master of the Force 3, but hey, it is what it is. But here, we are going to see that Kalani has a mostly downgraded weapon profile from both Kraken and the standard super tactical droid, sporting a black and white die on both his melee and ranged attack, which does still have lethal 1 and range 1 to 3. And this will be backed up by Kalani's offensive surge to hit, as we see on the standard super tactical droid. And strangely enough, he does still have sharpshooter 2, which is on par with Kraken. So while Kalani will still be able to plink away at targets should he need to, he won't be able to do so as reliably as his other 2 super tactical droid counterparts, so he's better off sticking with that support role. But what exactly makes Kalani so good as a support character aside from that 3rd command upgrade? Well, first up in his keywords, he is going to have Strategize 2, which will allow him to take 1 suppression token and dish out an aim and a dodge token to not 1 but 2 friendly units within range 1. And the utility here is pretty straightforward, as you are going to be able to dish out 4 green tokens each turn with 1 action, with the only drawback being a suppression token on yourself. So basically, 2 units at range 1 are going to be getting a free quick thinking action, which is just an awesome support ability. After that, we're going to see that Kalani does also have the direct AI keyword, much like the standard super tactical droid, and I won't spend too much more time fawning over this ability. It's just an A+ keyword, especially in the Separatist faction, and Kalani just would not be a proper support commander if he didn't have it. But next up, we are going to have yet another new keyword here, and this one is going to be reinforcements that first showed up when Kalani was revealed. And a unit with this keyword on them, very simply, can deploy after all other units without the reinforcements keyword on them have deployed, meaning they will drop down on the battlefield last, regardless of how many activations are left on either side. And this advantage will allow you to deploy your units in a very reactionary manner, and while this may not seem like the biggest deal for the Separatists, as they are a faction who very frequently out-activates their opponents and can deploy very reactionary anyways, it is definitely an advantage and one that will help out Separatist players who decide to go the route of lower activations, which very welcomely opens up new avenues of play for the Separatist faction, and will also become more relevant as more factions start to gain units with the reinforcements keyword. This, however, is going to replace the override keyword that we see on the other 2 units, and a lot of people out there do seem to view that as a sort of dent on Kalani. However, with Direct and Strategize 2, I think you can pretty much mitigate the downsides of AI without having to outright counter it, as most of the time AI really is just holding you back from getting an aim token, a problem that is really most punishing against those BX sniper droids, with a lot of other units in the faction being able to work their way around it. But even then, if you prioritize Kalani's activations, he could even himself be a good support unit in a bubble of snipers, and in my opinion, missing out on override isn't that big of a deal. And in my opinion, the Strategize 2 combined with that direct AI definitely makes Kalani a standout version of the super tactical droid in my eyes, though perhaps I am caught up with the old ways of Legion and not being progressive with the strategy, as there may be some avenues of approach with override that make it so we don't even have to worry about the activation priority that droid users are used to working within the parameters of. Still, with B1s, coordinates, and T-Series personnel, I'm going to voice my personal opinion and say that I think the Legion community might be a little bit too wrapped up and overvaluing the override keyword. Yes, it's a workaround for AI, but at the same time, I think having face-up order tokens is a better workaround for AI, as it also is going to give you more control over your activations. So I'm not exactly convinced that we're going to see a major shift in meta based on the override keyword, though I have been wrong about the droids before, and who am I to say that it won't happen again. But that is going to put a cap on our 3 unit cards for the super tactical droid. We have a commander heavily specialized in brawling with some support capabilities with Kraken, followed up by a more traditional support commander who's cranked up to 11 with Kalani, and lastly we have our standard unnamed super tactical droid who's going to sit somewhere between Kraken, Kalani, and also a standard T-Series. And overall, the variety here is great. I'll save my gushing for the end of the video, but I think this is one of the best box buy commanders in Star Wars Legion, as you're getting 3 very versatile units that will give you a whole lot of variety of synergies when it comes to building your lists. But these guys have a lot of good upgrade slots that they make great use of, so let's move along and take a look at how we would equip these commanders. And this video is going to be a little bit different in how we cover the upgrade slots, as we do have 3 different unit profiles, and while Kalani and the standard Super Tac Droid are pretty similar in what you should equip, Kraken himself is going to be a different playstyle, and will even have different upgrade slots, so I will have caveats here and there as to which ones I would equip on Kraken, while the rest are either going to be more universal or better fit on Kalani and the standard Droid. But first up here, we are going to have our command upgrade slot, one that the super tactical droids are going to absolutely adore. And if I'm being quite honest, almost every command card except for Inspiring Presence is going to work out pretty good on these guys. And while there are definitely cards here that are going to be higher priority than others, all 3 of these unit cards are going to have at least 2 upgrade slots, with Kalani having a 3rd, which will allow you to take some of the more niche command upgrade cards to fit in a more specialized role. But let's go ahead and talk about the most important ones first, and obviously we are going to have aggressive tactics here. As always, droids have coordinates, and they love getting face-up order tokens, making aggressive tactics a prime contender on any command upgrade slot, and there's no exception here. However, it is also worth mentioning that the super tactical droids do have a very impressive set of command cards, which, even without coordinate, is going to give you a good amount of face-up order tokens, and will also ensure that they are very often, if not always, the nominated commander to ensure that this card kicks into play. But the next card that I would very often prioritize on this unit is going to be Commanding Presence, which will of course increase your command range from 3 to 4, and on a support commander who's going to be able to benefit a lot of different units in a lot of different situations, having that extra reach is going to be very useful. However, there is another benefit to taking Commanding Presence on this unit, as it will actually increase the range of your direct ability from 1 to 2 up to 4, effectively doubling it, and while this is something that could be errated in the future, it is an incredibly powerful bonus when the Commanding Presence card is used on units with direct, and that's what makes Commanding Presence our second most recommended upgrade card for the Super Tac Droids. Though this card is going to lose a little bit of utility on Kraken, who doesn't have that direct keyword, but still, if he is brawling on the front lines, it is good to have that extra range, so even on him, it's not the worst upgrade. But after that, my 3rd most recommended card is going to be Vigilance, a 5-point upgrade that is going to allow you to hold on to 1 dodge on trooper units or 2 dodges on core trooper units as the turn rolls over. And with command cards that give us dodge tokens alongside the strategize keyword, I would definitely consider super tacs to be dodge token generators, which means Vigilance definitely can work out on them. But in my opinion, those are the big 3 cards, and I do believe most tactical droid builds are going to have either 1 or 2 of those, if not all 3, on Kalani. But once again, we do have a few other niche options you can take as backups here. And first up is going to be Strict Orders, which is going to be good for those builds where you're trying to mitigate suppression tokens. And if you are going to go for that override strategy, this might be a valuable upgrade to help you reliably chip away at suppression, as with a courage value of just 2, it's something you're definitely going to need to keep in check. But next up here, we are going to have Improvised Orders, a 5-point upgrade that can be pretty valuable in a Separatist list, and also very thematic on a super tactical droid, as you're going to have great overall control over what units are going to have face-up order tokens, while Improvised Orders is going to give you control over what few tokens may be left over in your order pool, which should make for a pretty thorough activation experience. But lastly, I am going to make note of Esteemed Leader. It's a card I dropped off this slide at the last second, as I figured in most scenarios in which you would want Guardian, you would simply be taking Magna Guards instead of huddling B1s around these guys. But I will mention that having Guardian for a character like Kraken is going to be super useful, and if for some reason you are going to be running a bunch of battle droids who are going to be within close range of Kraken and the opponents he's trying to smash, and for whatever reason you're not running Magna Guards, Esteemed Leader could be a valuable upgrade. But that is going to wrap up all of my recommended command upgrades. Again, there's a lot of options you can go with here, though Aggressive Tactics, Commanding Presence, and Vigilance are going to be my top 3, with Strict Orders gaining some value in some niche strategies. But we are going to be moving along and taking a look at the comms upgrades here. And first up here, we are going to have the Comms Jammer, which I would recommend taking on Kraken only. He is obviously a melee fighter who's going to be up in your opponent's face, and with just 4 red dice and no immunity to pierce, I think he is going to be smashing into units like Special Forces or Core Troopers, more so than heroes, which makes him a prime candidate for Comms Jammers, as we know this card isn't going to stop heroes from issuing orders to themselves, but it's definitely going to help Kraken get the Alpha Strike against enemies like, say, Wookiee Warriors. and should he smash into a gun line, it may prevent some fire support from coming his way. So Comms Jammer is going to be a very strong upgrade on the Kraken build, but something I probably would not run on Kalani or the standard Super Tac Droid. For them, I would instead go the route of the comms relay, which will allow you to push orders off yourself and onto a friendly unit within range 1 to 2, which is extremely useful when you consider that the super tactical command cards only target units with AI or droid troopers, and their 1-pip card is actually only going to trigger the super tactical droid himself, and taking comms relay is going to allow you to push that order off him onto another character or unit, perhaps even someone like Darth Maul, which has its obvious benefits. Now, if you are playing a support commander role, you may want to be activating someone like Kalani first to ensure you can get your tokens out with Strategize, but if you set up enough coordinations, you can always just pull it from the order pool somewhat reliably. But if you don't have a lot of coordinate in your force and you're not trying to play that game of picking tokens until the right one appears, you could just skip this upgrade and focus on getting face-up order tokens on your Super Tac Droid. And if that's something you are very concerned with, boy do I have a card for you, as my third recommended upgrade is going to be HQ Uplink, a 10-point exhaustible upgrade that, when tapped, will allow you to issue an order to yourself, which at face value has the utility of granting yourself face-up order tokens. However, if you guys are familiar with my videos and my opinions, you'll know that I usually don't recommend this card on its own, as 10 points and exhaustible is a pretty steep cost for just a face-up order token, and in my opinion, units need something else going on with them in order to justify taking such a pricey upgrade. Fortunately, there are 2 command cards here that are going to play off this upgrade very well, one of which is going to grant us free recovery actions, and another that is going to trigger some special abilities when a super tactical droid issues an order to a unit, and in the scenario of tapping an HQ uplink, the super tactical droid will be issuing an order to itself, thus granting itself the same bonuses as the command card without actually using the command card to issue an order to itself. And if that sounds confusing to you, we'll cover it later in the command card section of this video, so don't worry too much about it now. Just keep in mind that there is going to be some extra synergies that overlap with HQ uplink. But those are going to be my 3 recommended comms upgrades, and we will now shuffle along to gear. And first up here, we are going to have another Kraken exclusive, which of course is going to be a 4-point exhaustible upgrade that grants you the scale keyword. And the reason behind taking this is quite obvious. If Kraken is running across the field to engage enemies, he's going to need to be able to get over terrain, and potentially make quick getaways from fights by leaping over line of sight obscuring walls. And this card will allow him to do it without hassle. Now, it is exhaustible, and you can potentially use a free recovery from your 3-pip command card to untap this card, but it's very rare in a match that you need to scale over a wall twice, and usually tapping this card for 1 turn should hold you over. But if you're running Kalani or a standard Super Tac Droid, you're probably not playing as aggressive with him, so outside of Kraken, this upgrade is going to be somewhat superfluous. However, on these other 2 support-based commanders, we do have electro binoculars and portable scanners. One is going to be 8 points and allow you to dish out an aim token to a friendly unit at range 1, while the other grants you the ability to dish out a dodge token in the same manner for 2 points less. And while both of these cards do have obvious appeal on a support unit, you are going to need to plan out what you're going to be doing during your activations, as these will be taking up an entire action, and neither of them are as good on their own as Strategize. So while you can potentially dish out 3 aims and 2 dodges with someone like Kalani, it will take up both of his actions during an activation, and you will be paying a premium to do so when you already have a pretty good token generating keyword built into you. And if you need your commander to perform other actions, like perhaps moving to keep up with the rest of your force, paying 8 points for this upgrade may just simply not be worth it. However, I think if you are running a more passive gunline list, throwing some electro binoculars onto Kalani or a Super Tac Droid and giving them Spotter 1 might be a sound move, and give them something better to do with their second action. Meanwhile, if you are playing a little bit more aggressive with something like B2s or Magna Guards, it may be worth giving them dodge tokens to help shrug off some of that incoming fire, but I don't think I would take portable scanners unless I was definitely pairing it with Vigilance, as that really ups the utility of your dodge tokens as the turns go by. But lastly, we are going to move along to the training upgrade slot, an upgrade that only exists on the Kraken unit card, but a very useful upgrade slot that melee-oriented characters really want to have in their unit profile, and Kraken is no exception. And first up here, we are going to have Endurance. If you are taking Kraken to make use of that override special rule, you can really abuse it to remove AI from a bunch of friendly nearby units, but it is going to cause Kraken to really stack up those suppression tokens, and you're going to want something to keep those in check, as he does only have courage value of 2. But like I said earlier, I do have my doubts about these override builds. But if this gimmick does become a mainstay in the Separatist meta, you will certainly see Endurance be used a lot on Kraken, though personally I am going to be leaning towards some of the more aggressive combat-oriented training upgrades. Which brings us to our next card, which is of course Tenacity. And this 4-point upgrade is of course going to give you an extra red dice in melee combat if your unit has a wound on them, which will bump Kraken's melee pool from 4 to 5 red dice, which is pretty respectable. However, if you're looking to get some Alpha Strike melees in with Kraken, you might want to go with Offensive Push, a 4-point exhaustible card that is going to give you an aim token should you move that turn. And this will allow Kraken to charge into melee combat, roll those 4 red dice, and then have an aim token to spend on Lethal 1 in order to get Pierce, ensuring that he's hitting as hard as he possibly can on the charge. And considering that he's a model that only has 5 wounds, this may very well be worth it, as if you remove enough models in your opponent's squad, they are going to be swinging back with less dice, and have less chance to inflict wounds and potentially kill your hero. So Alpha Strike is very important, especially on a lower wound count character, who is going to be going up against enemy squads, and tapping Offensive Push to make sure you have Pierce in your weapon profile is a very good buff, even if it only occurs one time throughout the course of a match. But once again, I will make note that our 3-pip command card is going to give us free recovery actions, which is going to allow you to stack up exhaustible cards on these heroes. But that is going to wrap up all of our upgrade options and segue us into the command cards themselves. And while I did recently cover these command cards when they were initially revealed, I've since had a lot more time to think about strategies and how to make these command cards work in a list. So if you already saw that video, do stick around because I'm going to have a lot more to say about them this time around. And first up here, we are going to have our 3-pip command card, which is titled Do Not Underestimate Our Means. And this card will activate either 3 droid troopers or AI units, and it does have the ability to be divulged. And should you choose to reveal this command card at the beginning of the game, you may choose 3 friendly units with the AI keyword, and they will gain the Reinforcements keyword, which, much like Kalani, will allow them to wait and deploy after all other units that don't have reinforcements have been set down on the tabletop. So divulging this command card is going to allow you to deploy your units in a very reactionary manner, and there's going to be a ton of deployment scenarios in which having this keyword is greatly going to help you out, as it's going to force your opponent to throw his metaphorical cards down on the tabletop while you have the luxury to work around them. For example, if there is a big scary tank and you don't know which firing lane your opponent is going to set up in, you can give reinforcements to some of your vehicles and hold them back until that tank is deployed, and drop your units in a safer part of the field. Alternatively, you can wait to deploy your droidicas in order to have them roll up on your opponent's weakest flank. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can already sort of do this by out-activating your opponent, something the Separatists have no problem doing, but high activation count lists are as popular as ever, especially with Rebel players now, so if you don't have a 3 activation lead on your foe, divulging this card is still going to help you out. It's also worth mentioning that if this card is divulged, you don't discard it or play it on the first turn, you still have it in your hand to be played later. However, you won't be able to make use of the standard ability associated with this card, allowing you to play this card as simply a more restricted version of Assault that only activates 3 droid trooper or AI units. However, if you did not divulge this command card, you are going to get some abilities when you play it normally, as this card reads, if it was not divulged, at the start of the activation phase, choose 2 units with face-up order tokens, and those 2 chosen units recover. And this is the card that I was mentioning throughout the course of this video that gives you free recovery actions. It does only affect 2 units with face-up order tokens, not the 3 units issued orders by this card, but that is going to be a bit of a blessing in disguise here, as you do not need to choose a unit that is within command range of the super tactical droid, but it also means that this recovery is not restricted to a unit that has AI or the droid trooper keyword. Really, the only requirement they need to get that free recovery action is going to be to have a face-up order token, which means you could potentially trip something like Seize the Initiative on Grievous or Maul, and they themselves would be able to make the recovery. And the same would go for units who receive face-up order tokens through things like Direct, Coordinates, or HQ Uplink, which will open up an extremely complex new network of strategies when it comes to building a list for Separatists. And I can see a ton of crazy plays in the future where people load up their characters with exhaustible upgrades and then tap something like Seize or HQ Uplink and use this command card to untap everything all at once and perhaps unload all of their suppression also. In fact, you can even have a character like Kraken use Override on his entire army and take on like 10 suppression tokens, only to play this card next turn and force a recovery on him. Really, the sky is the limit with this card thanks to its loose prerequisites. And I think this card is going to have very strong implications on almost every release we see in the Separatist faction from here on out, especially with commanders and operatives. So while I do like the idea of divulging this card to get reinforcements on 3 units, I do think the recovery action is going to be the more powerful play. However, I think most players are going to know how they're going to play this command card in the list building phase before the match even begins. But even then, the sheer flexibility of this card is very commendable, and it's a great start for the Super Tac Droid's command hand. But next up here we are going to have our 2-pip, which is Preservation Protocols, and out of the 3, this one is the most combat oriented, though it is definitely skewed more towards surviving combat than engaging in it. And this will activate 2 droid troopers or AI units, and this card reads, when a super tactical droid issues an order to a unit that is either AI or a droid trooper, that unit gains 1 dodge token along with disengage and impervious. Now, while disengage is situational, it is advantageous, especially if you are running a gun line and a force user with a new burst of speed card smashes into you. You will be able to pull out and continue to engage them, which will be very vicious with things like B2 battle droids, and really give your opponent a tough time charging into your ranks. After that, Impervious is again situational, but it's very good on a character like Kraken, who I said earlier is lacking with immunity to pierce. And the dodge token is a nice extra touch, and will again gain more value if you take Vigilance as a command upgrade. But overall, this command card seems like a bit of a reactionary measure, one that is going to require your opponent to run a melee bomb into your ranks for it to play to its fullest effect, and during the initial reveal, I considered this to be the worst of the 3 command cards. But much like the 3-pip card that we just looked at, there is a devil in the details here that makes this card more impressive than it may appear at face value. And once again, it is going to be in the text of this card, saying that the only prerequisite you need to gain these benefits is to have been issued an order by the Super Tactical Droid. It does not specify that it needs to be issued by this card itself, which means that a unit that receives a face-up order token from this Super Tactical Droid's direct will also gain the benefits of this card when played. And should the Super Tactical Droid issue an order to himself via something like Seize the Initiative or HQ Uplink, he too will reap the rewards of this card without having to actually be a target of its activations. So while this card itself is only going to give you 2 face-up order tokens, it is possible for it to grant these keywords and dodge token to up to 4 units, including the Super Tactical Droid himself. And when you compare this to a card like Roger Roger that activates 3 droid troopers and gives them a single dodge token, this 2-pip becomes incredibly impressive. So even if you never end up using Disengage or Impervious during the turn you play this card, dishing out 4 dodge tokens is a huge benefit, and again, if you have that Vigilance upgrade equipped, you can carry them over to the next turn to make sure they don't go to waste. So I do find Preservation Protocols to be a very respectable 2-pip command card, and while I still wouldn't say it's the best of these 3 command cards, I'm definitely more hesitant to say it's the worst. But I will say that it could be very much game-winning in those scenarios in which you have melee units crashing into your lines, and it is also probably going to be easier to pull off than your 1-pip card, which is going to require a bit more finesse and foresight on your behalf as the commander. But let's go ahead and take a look at that 1-pip card, and that is going to be They Too Shall Suffer. And this card will activate the Super Tactical Droid himself and no other units. And at the end of the command phase, you may choose an enemy unit that is not an operative or a commander that has a face-up order token, and return that order token to your opponent's pool. And during the first time your opponent would draw an order token from his pool for that turn, you may instead tell him the rank of the unit that you want him to activate. So basically, you choose a non-hero token to return to your opponent's order pool at the beginning of a turn, and when he would draw his first random token for the turn, you may instead tell him which token you want him to draw. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start by clarifying a few things about this card. First of all, it does not require that your opponent's order tokens are within command range of your Super Tactical Droid in order for you to return them. It's simply any face-up order token that is not a commander or operative, regardless of range. And when the time comes where your opponent makes his first pull from that order pool, there is no restriction on which rank you can demand him to pull. So while you can't return a token from an operative or a commander, you can tell your opponent to draw an operative or commander during the first time he pulls that token, which honestly can be extremely powerful. There are many situations in this game where you want your heroes activating later in the turn so they can maneuver in a more reactionary manner, and if you force an enemy hero like Anakin Skywalker to go too early in the turn, you will be able to react to him with your entire army, and the same sort of shenanigans can go on with units and transports, and really just force your opponent to do things that he doesn't want to do. But really, here's the most interesting thing about this 1-pip command card in my opinion. It is a 1-pip that you are not going to be playing on turns when you would usually play a 1-pip. For example, if your opponent plays something like Son of Skywalker, you're not going to be able to return that order to his hand, as it is going to be on a commander or operative. And while you would still be able to tell your opponent which token he draws from his order pool first, he's probably not going to be too concerned about that, as Luke Skywalker is already face up on the tabletop, ready to swing his hardest. Meanwhile, They Too Will Suffer is not boosting any units in your army with any extra tokens or keywords, and you'd simply be much better off playing a card like Roger Roger or Preservation Protocols and just try to weather the storm. They Too Will Suffer is a command card that is going to be best played when you anticipate your enemy's move and what card they're going to use, in order to diminish its effects and undermine their lineup of activations, which most other heroes are doing with their 2-pip and 3-pip command cards. A prime example of this would be playing this card against Clone Captain Rex when he throws down Take That Clankers, which is going to diminish the benefits of that card, and again allow you to further disrupt his activations beyond that. But here's my big challenge for you guys in this video. I want you to comment down below what card you think is going to be best countered by a Separatist player throwing down They Too Will Suffer. It's a very fun command card that can be quite powerful, but it requires you, the player, to be the super tactical droid by anticipating what move will come next from your opponent. Play this at the wrong time and you're probably not going to get the best results. Play it at the right time and you're going to smack your opponent's plans down for that turn. Overall, I love the Super Tactical Droids command cards. I think it's a fantastic command hand, and I think they're going to ensure that Super Tactical Droids show up in a lot of players' lists for quite some time to come. But this video is starting to get a bit long in the tooth, so I am going to stop gushing over the command cards and move along to the section of this video where I show you some recommended builds for the Super Tactical Droid and its variants. And while I usually do like to give you a few alternative ways to run a unit in this part of the video, the different unit cards themselves are pretty much varying ways to run a super tactical droid, so I'm just going to show you guys a recommended build for each of the 3 unit cards. And first up here we are going to have your standard super tactical droid, and this one is going to have the least amount of upgrades, but we are going to go ahead and slot in aggressive tactics and commanding presence into those 2 command slots. As we've seen throughout the course of this video, the Super Tactical Droid is going to be dishing out a lot of face-up order tokens, and he will be a great candidate for aggressive tactics. So unless you have another commander who's going to be nominated more than the Super Tactical Droid, which you probably won't unless you're running Dooku, it's definitely a good 15-point investment. After that, we are going to have Commanding Presence, again, more range to make sure you can get the most out of your orders, and also increase your direct from 2 all the way up to 4. I do like Vigilance, but I think this one beats it out on the standard Super Tactical Droid, as he only has Strategize 1 and isn't going to be issuing out quite as many dodge tokens as, say, Kalani. But next up, we are going to be taking the Comms Relay upgrade for 5 points, and this is going to be a somewhat optional upgrade that is going to be most relevant in the turn in which you play your 1-pip, or if you have another non-droid trooper or AI unit that you want to push orders onto using your command cards. This is a good workaround for it, although I don't think it's completely necessary, and you could also opt for something like HQ Uplink. The same is going to go for the gear upgrade slot here, where we have Electro Binoculars. If you really want to dedicate this guy towards a support role, you could take this upgrade to dish out more aims, though personally I think I would rather just spend 5 points and get Kalani, who's going to have Strategize 2. But if you really want a support commander who also has Override, this will be a good option here. And if I were trying to save points, I probably would drop Comms Relay before Electro Binoculars. But if you're on a tight budget, you could probably drop both of these and just stick with the 2 command upgrades, as they are the most important here, and that would drop you down from 128 points to 115 points, and is probably the most economic way to run the Super Tactical Droid. Again, I would not cheap out on the command cards, it's practically why you're taking him in the first place, so definitely stick with those 2 and gauge where you need to go from there. But next up we are going to have our recommended build for Kraken, and of course he is going to have the training upgrade slot here, which is unique to his unit card. But in the command slot we are going to be taking aggressive tactics once again, but this time swapping out commanding presence for vigilance, and the main reason for that is being that he does not have the direct keyword, and while the extra range of commanding presence is good for a commander that's going to be roving around the battlefield and engaging enemies, he is likely going to be doing so with his own cohort of Magna Guards or B2s, or perhaps even alongside someone like Maul, all of which are going to be very grateful for any dodge tokens they can maintain. Though if you do plan on using Kraken and his Override 2 keyword a lot, you could swap this out for Strict Orders, again to add a little bit more management to your suppression tokens, though personally I am going to stick with Vigilance. But next up, we are going to have the comms jammer here, and this is going to gum up your opponent when they're trying to activate. As we mentioned earlier, it is very useful, and sure, you could go with an upgrade like hacked comms or HQ uplink, but you're going to be prioritizing Kraken's activations anyways, and I think comms jammer would benefit him in the long run, though if you were running him alongside a character like Maul, who has rather selfish command cards when it comes to orders, you could definitely consider HQ uplink. After that, I did decide to go with Tenacity for the training upgrade slot here. I really like the idea of Kraken having 5 red dice in melee combats. Again, if you're going to go for that override gimmick, swapping this out for endurance would be a good move. And if you decide to take other exhaustible cards, perhaps like HQ uplink, you could throw offensive push in this category to get that alpha strike, and also make those big recover actions that untap multiple cards, which will also pair nicely with the ascension cables that I am going to put in the gear upgrade slot here. And we all know what this upgrade is doing here. It's giving you more mobility, which is more or less a necessity for a melee oriented character, though if you are feeling a little bit risky, you could potentially drop this one, but there really isn't any other gear upgrades I would recommend in its place, so take it or leave it. So overall, this is the build that I'm going to be running with Kraken, but there's definitely some variety you can add to it. Again, if you're going with Override, swap out Vigilance for Strict Orders, and Tenacity for Endurance. And if you're looking for a more alpha strike Kraken who's going to be run alongside another character like Maul, perhaps swap out Comms Jammer for HQ uplink and Tenacity for offensive push. But overall, this build is going to be coming in around 133 points, which is getting a little pricey, but I still think it's fair for the bundle you get here, especially considering how great those command cards are. But next up, we are going to have our third unit card here, which of course is Kalani. And with him, we are getting that third command upgrade slot, which is very nice because now we don't have to choose between Vigilance and Commanding Presence. We can instead just take both alongside Aggressive Tactics and have a fully stacked commander unit. One who's going to dish out Surge tokens, hold over any extra dodges that weren't spent, and also direct at range 4. But we're also going to go ahead and give him HQ uplink. Yes, you could save 5 points here and give him Comms Relay, but it's really only going to come into play when you use his 1-pip card, and I would much prefer giving him face-up order tokens as much as I can, not just to maximize how his command cards are played, but also because I want to ensure that he is going first every turn, so he can activate and dish out those tokens with Strategize 2 as fast as he can. But lastly, we are going to have the Electro Binoculars here, and if you're playing Kalani more passively, this is going to allow you to dish out a third aim token each turn, and I think you will be bouncing between using Spotter 1 and making recovery actions to untap HQ uplink here, but if you're going to be in a sizable enough blob, passing out that extra aim token may be worth it throughout the course of a match. But if you want Kalani to be a little bit more aggressive, perhaps moving or attacking, I would go ahead and save the 8 points here. I tend to avoid paying the premium for Electro Binoculars unless you already have a spotter keyword for it to stack on top of, though I think they could work on Kalani in a full-blown support build. But all 5 of these upgrades are going to bring Kalani up to 143 points, which is getting up there in cost, and honestly, you could shave 18 points off by ditching HQ uplink and Electro Binos, as I think they are far less necessary than the command upgrades. But if you're really trying to cram into a list and you want to be frugal here, you could potentially drop Vigilance also, but I probably wouldn't do that if Kalani were to be backing up a Saber user. As we all know, having Vigilance and carrying dodge tokens over on Jedi is super useful. And now we are going to move along to the final portion of this video where I go over what I think about each of these units and then also give them a ranking. And first up, I gotta say the model for this guy is super cool. I love the poses and they look fantastic, and I am very curious to see how everyone is going to paint their super tactical droid, because honestly I don't think too many people are going to be freehanding Kalani and Kraken's armor detail, and I'm not a big fan of their colors anyways. But as a unit in Star Wars Legion, what do I think about the standard iteration of the super tactical droid? Well, I'll be quite honest, I think most of the time a standard T-Series is going to serve in a better general list than this guy would. I actually think I prefer Bolster 2 over Strategize 1, at least when it comes to commanding standard droids. And while the upgraded Direct is very nice, I still like the idea of using that Direct to kick off your B1 coordination chain. However, with AATs and 2 new droid vehicles on the way, being Dwarf Spider droids and the Persuader tank, the Direct AI keyword may become even more appealing, and if you're looking to run a more specialized Separatist list, he would be a valuable upgrade over the standard T-Series, though I don't think he is going to totally replace them. Meanwhile, on the topic of Override, I could definitely see this version of the super tactical droid coming into play and camping in a bubble of BX series sniper strike teams, again with the main purpose here being to make sure that their AI does not trip them out and prevent them from activating Lethal 1 on their weapons. But aside from that, I think for the most part, Kalani is going to be the better version of the super tactical droid. I think he's going to be a better support commander, and a much more significant leap when upgrading from a T-Series. And with Strategize 2 and Direct AI units, he could even be a viable character to pair with those BX sniper bubbles, override or not. And because of that, the standard super tactical droid is going to be coming in at a ranking of B for me. Honestly, he would be getting a B+ or maybe even an A if Kalani didn't exist. But in most scenarios where you want a super tactical droid, I think Kalani's just going to be pulling more weight. But again, I will iterate that maybe I am massively underrating the override keyword, and army synergy could always change over time, but for the time being, aside from BX sniper bubbles, I don't really think the AI keyword is holding back the Separatist for it to make that much of a difference. But next up we are going to have Kraken, who very clearly likes to punch people, and I do find him to be one of the more fascinating unit profiles that we've seen in this game. On one hand, he is somewhat comparable to the Wookiee Chieftain as a sort of Diet Jedi character, but he still is holding on to some of those very potent support abilities, mostly with the command cards themselves, something that the Wookiee Chieftain is coming up very short with, and I could imagine Kraken alongside someone like Darth Maul being an absolute menace on the tabletop. But he definitely has his shortcomings as a brawler, and I'm not really sure how competitive he and a squad of Magna Guards running up the field is going to be compared to the Separatist meta that we're used to now, but I think he still is a great bundle, and if the override keyword does end up shifting the entire foundation of the Separatist strategy, I could see it coming into play more so on Kraken's aggressive profile than on the standard super tactical droids, but that is something that only time will tell. So overall, Kraken is going to be getting a ranking of A from me. He's definitely someone you don't want alpha striking you in melee, even if you are a Force user, and he still makes use of that awesome command card hand, so you're kind of getting the best of both worlds with this unit profile. But lastly, we are going to have Kalani, my personal favorite out of this trio, and what is there to say that I haven't already said? Yes, Kraken might be shaking up the Separatist meta, but Kalani is going to be modifying tried and true strategies that have been winning competitions for quite some time now. And while that may not sound very forward-thinking, I think Kalani's upgrades and abilities are just so universal that it's going to be a good toolbox to have, regardless of how many new units come out or how much the meta shifts, at least for quite some time. And because of that, Kalani is going to be getting the ranking of A+ for me. He is pretty much the character that I dream of when I think support commander, and I think I'm going to have a blast bouncing between him and Kraken, though for the most part, I think Kalani is going to allow for some more versatile lists. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. Which of these three iterations is your favorite? Do you think I'm lowballing the standard super tactical droid and the override keyword? Obviously, I don't think I am, but perhaps I'm being a bit short-sighted here. I was, after all, terribly wrong about the T-Series. But if you do disagree, please do give a good explanation as to why, or what I may be missing. But if you guys enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, turning on notifications so you don't miss any content. I have a ton more units that I need to cover for this Kashyyyk wave, so don't miss out on any of that, and as always, until next time, take care.